Hello everybody, thank you very much for joining us on this what seems to be predominantly grey day in March. Lovely to see you all online. We've got over 150 people on the call, which is fantastic. So thank you for making the time to join us today. You've got three of us presenting the session for you today. My name is Sue Jones and I'm Executive Head of Education at the Institute, and I'm joined by two colleagues. Jim works with me at the Institute and Tahmina is on IBMS Council and has loads of experience of registration training portfolio. So would you like to introduce yourselves formally and then we'll get started?
Thank you, Sue.
You first.
I'm Tahmina. I'm Deputy Programme Lead for the Biomedical Science Apprenticeship at the University of SoPs in Manchester. I'm a biomedical scientist by background, specialising in pathology and blood transfusion. My last role in the lab was pathology training coordinator. I do have students as well as apprentices and look after the development staff in the lab. Thank you.
Thank you, Tahmina. And Jim?
Yeah, my name's Dr. Jim Taylor and I am an ex-academic. I think that's the worst kind of academic that there is. I am the new Head of Digital Education for the IBMS. I've been in post for a couple of months. And my role will be to kind of bring the IBMS's digital education offering and training offering kind of a bit more up to date than it is currently. And these support hubs are part of the process to facilitate that, because we're getting loads of new ideas and information coming through from you guys, which is brilliant.
Thank you both. Tahmina, your sound is a little bit in and out. I don't know if it's the microphone, but it might be while I do the first bit. It might be worth just checking on the sound. It's just a little bit breaking up a little bit.
Right, okay, I can. Thanks.
Thank you. Right, so if we go on to the first slide of the session, I don't have control at the moment. Jim's going to be in control. I will take control later. So because we're going to ask you some questions, we want you to participate in the first part. So Jim's got control of the slides at the moment. So this is just a brief overview of what it is we wanted to talk to you about today. So as Jim said, we're very keen that we have lots of support and resources for people around education and training as we go forwards, and that you can access them and they're helpful to you. So some of the big changes coming this year, as I'm sure you're all aware of, are the standards of proficiency that the HCP has for all of their registered professions are being updated this year. And of course, that then impacts on biomedical scientists and clinical scientists. So what we wanted to do today was to talk to you about the role of the HCPC and the IBMS together in your route to registration, because there are certain ways that you can gain registration with the HCPC. So just to clarify the roles of the HCPC and IBMS and who does which bit. We're going to talk to you about the existing registration training portfolio that some of you may have already started, what it is and why you might want to do it, in case there are any people on the call who've not got to do a placement year or who are not graduates yet and wanted to know a little bit more about that. Then the next thing we're going to talk about is the standards of proficiency for biomedical scientists and what the updates have been. So what's changed, what's different, and what might you expect from the new portfolio. And then the last bit will be an update on the portfolio itself, where we're up to with doing the update, and when that will be coming in for you to use. So that's just an outline of what we're going to do in the session today. So I'm going to hand over to Jim to do some polling. So over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, so throughout today's Support Hub session, we've got several questions that we'd really like to get some feedback from you from. The system that we're using is a system called Vivox, so you don't need to install an app, you don't need to do anything other than point your phone's camera to that QR code on screen at the moment and then just follow the link that your phone will take you to. It will tell you that it's waiting for the session to begin, so that's good. If you don't have your phone to hand, but you can get another tab open on the computer or laptop that you're on, if you go to the vivox.app link that's on the screen at the minute and just type in that ID code that's on screen, again, it's purely web-based interaction, so you don't need to install any software, so there shouldn't be any issues with firewalls and that kind of thing. So I'll just give you a second to rummage in handbags or whatever to get your phone out and follow the link through to the screen. The next couple of slides that are coming are just a couple of really simple intro questions that will give us some useful information about where in the UK you are and what kind of role you currently occupy and that kind of thing. The questions are mainly just to give you the opportunity to just see how the system works, so that as we go through, you're able to kind of participate more fully. Hopefully I've spoken enough there to fill the time while people point the phone at the QR code, so I'll move on. What you should see is that anytime now, your screen should flash up and ask you what region of the UK you're from. There we go. You can probably see on my screen that people are participating really well, which is excellent.
While people are putting the answers in, Jim, could we copy that code and pop it in the Q&A or the chat just so people can see it if they missed it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to do it on a different screen. I'll just drop the code into the chat window. And the address is vvox.app if anybody needs that. Oh no, that's not good.
Yeah, Matthew's got an error code.
Yeah, I wonder if that's... Was it just that too many people were trying to do it all at once? If you refresh the screen, Matthew, does it work? Oh, I'm gutted.
I think other people have managed to do it. Are you getting answers in? Can you see?
Yeah, we've got 116 of 130. Ooh. I'll just give it another 20 or 30 seconds just so that everybody that's trying to participate can. Just now we know that there's an issue there.
Yeah, but people have got it to work okay. Hopefully you can get it to work there, Matthew.
I am doing it on my phone at the same time, and obviously it's got the background thing on. It is working on my phone at the minute, so.
Okay. So we've got most people who wanted to do it have sent a response.
We've only got 4 people that haven't responded, so let's see where everybody's from. Oh, look at that. Ooh. Yorkshire and Humber is well represented.
And Scotland and London.
Brilliant. It's fantastic to see we've got everybody from all 4 nations, which is really good.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Okay, so that was just an introductory question, really. The first question that we're really interested in the answer to is what your main job role is.
Oh, they're coming in much quicker now. They're all VVox pros now.
Absolutely. Everybody's there.
Where's your sound effects, Jim?
Say that again.
We don't have the clock.
Oh no, there was sound effects last time, wasn't there? There was
we had the countdown clock.
We did. We had the countdown clock on, didn't we? I'm not even going to try and imitate it on this call because that would be bad.
Fantastic. Everyone's been really quick.
I hope that as I've got the question set up, I hope I've managed to roughly capture everybody's role. So if your role isn't exactly represented here, please do, try and use a best fit model.
Pop it in a Q&A.
Or pop it in a Q&A. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'll put the code in again. Couple of people have asked for the code again. Q&A.
Lab manager role. Yeah, thanks for that, Mohammed. It's interesting because I did mean to add it to the training manager role because they're often hand in hand.
Yeah, we've got someone who's an MLA. We didn't put that in as a distinct
group. We didn't put that in, did we?
No. And there's someone who's a student, but not on placement. Associate practitioner.
Oh, Matthew, I'm glad you've got in. That's good.
I'm just going to Carly. I'm just putting in Carly the code. If you put in a code, or you can go to, it's called VVox app. Hi Lee. Lee Peters is on the call. Oh, I was just going to type that answer. I'm going to too quick for me to get into the right question to put the answer in. So if anybody's joined late and they can't get it, it's called vvox.app. So it's VEVOX.app.
Yeah, if you have a look in the chat, you'll see that both the vvox.app link is there and also the meeting code. Oh, the numbers are climbing. This is good.
Yeah, Samantha's asked. She's not one of the roles that's on there. What we'll do is we'll go back through the chat, and anybody who wasn't on there, we'll just pick out what your job role was. So that's really useful for you to have added in. Thank you for that. I think everybody has responded who's on.
I think so. Yeah, we're there. Excellent stuff. So let's see what Okay, that's really interesting. Brilliant.
Lovely.
Okay, hopefully the lab managers and training managers, lab managers perhaps added themselves into the training manager category, maybe. Brilliant stuff. Okay, so that's just some introductory kind of demographic data that we wanted to collect. So, Sue, I believe it's over to you, or Tahmina.
It's going to be Tahmina first.
It's Tahmina. There we go.
Yeah.
Tahmina, you have control.
Thank you, James. Hopefully my sound quality is a lot better now. I have checked my internet connection and it looks fine, and I've tested it and it was fine. So shout out if you can't hear me or anything. Thank you. So we'll start off with introducing who the HCPC are. So the HCPC are the Health and Care Professions Council. They're a regulatory body for 15 professions in the UK, including the biomedical scientists. And the HCPC set the standards for the education, training and practice for professionals. The HCPC also approve the programmes which professionals need to complete to register with them. So they're the degrees that we accredit, the biomedical science degrees. And we keep a register of professionals known as registrants who meet the HCPC standards. So the HCPC take action if any of the professionals on the register don't meet the required standards. So the IBMS accreditation of the biomedical science degrees, they cover the components of the degree that the HCPC set the standards for, which is the education and training, and the required subject knowledge that's required for biomedical scientists. So to work as a registered biomedical scientist in the UK, you need to have successfully completed both the IBMS accredited biomedical science degree and the IBMS registration training portfolio. So what is the IBMS registration training portfolio? It's documentary evidence that demonstrates that you're applying your education and training together, along with demonstrating professional conduct, attitude, knowledge and skills, and that you're meeting the HCPC Standards of Proficiency. It's a portfolio that allows you to showcase the work of a professional while showing your development and gaining competencies. It's helpful for interviews, and it's a source of useful information, so you can go back to it and refer to it when you need to. You can have a look at the reference copy of the IBMS registration training portfolio on the IBMS website. So for biomedical scientists, this is just to reiterate the HCPC Standards of Education and Training. So that's your, it's abbreviated to SETS, and that's the degree that you complete. And the HCPC Standards of Proficiency, so your SoPs, is the registration training portfolio. So once you've completed that, you're then awarded with a certificate of competence, which allows you then to apply for HCPC registration. So there's 4 routes to registration. Number 1, you can complete an IBMS accredited biomedical science degree or a degree apprenticeship and complete a placement in a clinical lab that's been approved by the IBMS for training. You will complete a registration training portfolio, and once you've completed this successfully, along with the degree, you can then apply for HCPC registration and use the title of a practicing biomedical scientist. The second route is completing an IBMS accredited biomedical science degree, but without completing a placement. So you would then complete the portfolio after you graduate, so as a trainee biomedical scientist. Once you've completed, you would then have a verification for the portfolio and then receive a certificate of competence and then register with the HCPC as a biomedical scientist. The third route, you can complete a non-accredited biomedical science degree. If you went down this route, then the degree would need to be assessed by the IBMS, and you may need to complete some top-up modules, which the IBMS will advise you on. Once you've completed the top-up modules, you can also complete the training portfolio, again in a clinical lab, and once you've received the certificate of competence, you can then apply for registration with the HCPC. And then you've got the equivalence route. So there might be a staff member who has several years of experience in a lab, and they can complete an equivalence portfolio. This is then assessed by 3 reviewers and professional assessor conducts, Viva, and then you will receive a certificate of competence, and then you can register with the HCPC. So just a summary of the routes to registration. They're the first 3 that I've just talked about. and then you've got the fourth, which is the equivalent route. So once you've got your certificate of competence, when you're ready for the certificate of competence, you've completed the training portfolio, you can then apply for verification. So this is an assessment. A verifier will complete a report to say that you've met the threshold requirements to become registered as a biomedical scientist. And then the IBMS will issue a certificate of competence once the candidate has completed both the degree and the portfolio successfully. So this is the current registration training portfolio, and it's based on the HCPC Standards of Proficiency set in 2014. There's currently 105 HCPC standards for the biomedical scientists that they need to meet in the portfolio, and they demonstrate this through the 30 pieces of evidence. The portfolio is organised into 2 sections with 5 modules in each section. So each module requires 3 pieces of evidence. Section 1 is professional conduct, and there's a list of the different modules in section 1 that relate to professional conduct. And then we have section 2, which is professional practice, and then again 5 modules that relate to professional practice.
Okay, so the standards of proficiency are changing. Part of this webinar is to outline what some of those changes are and how they will affect you. So let's start with a question on how much you think you already know about the changes. Have you literally just heard that some changes are on the way, or are you a total boss and you know them inside out?
We've got people filling in now. Got lots and lots of people filling it in, which is great.
Which is really good.
We can see the responses as they come in live. That's why I'm looking to the left, watching the number tick up. I feel like we need a drum roll or the clock. It's just not the same.
We do need the sound
sound
effects back, I think, for the next one, don't we? Definitely.
Starting to slow down. I wonder how many stars we're going to get.
It's a bit statistical as well, so it'll present what the average number of stars is.
Oh. We're almost there. Just got a couple of people left to make the choice. Just going back through the questions and answers just in case anybody doesn't know how to do it. Oh yeah, somebody wants a session ID. If I can't.
Okay, it looks as though everybody's responded. So let's see what we've got. How do people feel? Okay. So people know that they're coming, know that changes are in the pipeline, but maybe need some support on what happens next.
Mm-hmm.
That's brilliant. Okay, so follow-on question from that. When will the registration portfolio change to reflect the changes that are coming? Do people know what date that change will come into effect?
I can see a couple of people have asked about the equivalence route, so I can answer that a little bit later. People have asked about that 4th route. So I can see both Catherine and Laura have asked a question about that, so I can pick that up. People are putting in the answers. Should I talk about the equivalence route while we're waiting for the last few people to put their answers in? It won't take long.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, so the equivalence route, we have 2. We've got one which is the Certificate of Competence by Equivalence for Biomedical Scientists, and then we also have a Certificate of Attainment, which is for clinical scientists. And they're both for people who are established in the lab and are working at the level of that professional. So for the biomedical scientist, it's usually for people who work in somewhere like genetics or andrology or something like that, where they wouldn't traditionally have biomedical scientist roles, but they're working at the level of a biomedical scientist already, and they have been for a few years. So if you look on the website, we have information about the equivalence route on there. If you can't find it, if you let me know, then I'll have a look and I'll find the documents and send them to you. At the moment, it's quite small cohort. So we have one intake a year, and we traditionally have 10 to 15 people apply, and then they get screened and then they go through. So they have a portfolio to map against, which is similar to the registration training portfolio, and that's assessed by a layperson, an academic and a professional. And then they have a viva to check their understanding, which is similar to a verification. So if people are interested in learning more about that, we can certainly do something as a blog, or we can do something in the magazine if people would find it useful to find out a bit more about that. So it's not for people who are MLAs, it's not for people who are not at the level of biomedical scientist, it's people who are, but just haven't done the traditional route in. So hopefully that's helpful and that's answered your questions, Catherine and Laura, but if not, we can certainly ask the comms team to pop something out if you like. So have we got all our answers in, Jim?
We certainly have. Ooh.
Oh, look at that.
Well done.
Way ahead. Fantastic. Everybody knows. Yeah, it feels a bit like, I've forgotten the programme, Game of Thrones. The new SoPs are coming, doesn't it? Like winter is coming. But everybody knows the date, which is really good.
That's really good. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So can I answer a question which people have asked me quite a lot? I'm just going to request control. I'm talking and clicking buttons at the same time. So what people have been asking is, I've got somebody who wants to start the portfolio. Should I make them wait? And the answer to that is no. If somebody's ready to start the portfolio, the current version will be in operation until the end of August. So we'll do a changeover. There will be a transition. So anyone who's starting the portfolio this year, start them off on the version that we currently have, and that will be processed as normal. They'll have a maximum period of 3 years as normal to complete their evidence against that. So we're obviously going to have a transition between the old and the new version. So you don't need to make anybody wait, but if you are a placement tutor and your students are going out on placement next year, it's probably easier to give them the updated version once it's released. So they're the most common questions that people have asked. So hopefully that's helpful, but you can ask any questions that you want to at the end as well. So I have the green screen, so hopefully I now have control and I can click through the slide, so we'll see. So as we've said, the new HCPC's SOPs for biomedical scientists have been written. The new standards were released actually last year in 2022, so it's great that some of you have had a look at them. And they do come in from the 1st of September this year. So that obviously means the registration training portfolio in its current format needs to be rewritten so that we can include all of those new SOPs. So Tahmina told you for the current version, we've actually got 105. Doesn't want to let me do it, Jim. Does it say I've got control? Was that me? I think it just took a little while. So in the current version, there are 105 standards of proficiency. In the new version of the standards, there are 129. So it's not going to get any smaller. There are more standards for us to map against. So there will be 129 in the new version of the documentation. We've put some links on the bottom of this slide. We will share them afterwards. Somebody's asked that question. We'll share the slides and we'll share the video. And a couple of the PDFs we've also got as documents, so we can share those with attendees as well. So there's a review of the standards of proficiency, and there are documents to show you what the new ones are. And there is also a document to show you how they've changed. So one of the documents has them both side by side, so you can see what's different between the old and the new. And one of the documents just has the new ones listed, so you can look at them in a clean copy. So all of that information is freely available. If you go to the HCPC website or you follow the links at the bottom of the slide, you'll be able to find all that information and see what the differences are. So what's changed in the way that they're written, as well as the number of them, there's a difference in tone. So what the new standards say is the person who is being verified needs to show that they are demonstrating, that they are actively implementing the new standards. They're not just knowing about them. It's not just I went to a seminar and I heard about it, or I saw a presentation and I've given you a piece of evidence. They need to show how they actively use these things in their practice. So there's a change in the language from the HCPC, and this is across all of the different professions that they regulate. So people need to show that they do the things that they're in the standards, not just know about them. There is some new standards that have been included that have been emphasised more or have more numbers of standards associated with them, and I've outlined those on this slide. So the first of those is about promoting public health and preventing ill health. There's a bit more of a focus on that. The equality, diversity and inclusion section is much bigger than it used to be, and that's one of the ones that I'm going to specifically pick up in the next few slides. That central role of the service user, again, is much bigger than it was before. It was big before, but they've got more emphasis on it. So the importance of informed consent for the patient and the importance of effective communication between the practitioner and the patient are emphasised more. And then the new bits are around maintaining fitness to practice, not just with your own physical health, but also with your mental health. So there's an emphasis on understanding whether you are fit to practice, understanding whether you need help and where you can seek that advice and guidance. So they are now in the standards of proficiency as well. And then the last thing is needing to keep up to date with digital skills and new technologies, which is fine. That's something that you would expect as the world changes, that we need to just keep up to date with things as we're going along. So these are standards that people need to be aware of for the new portfolio coming in and changing. But anyone who is already registered needs to know that these are the things the HCPC will ask you to demonstrate. If you were selected as somebody who needs to demonstrate that they get selected, when they're on the register and need to demonstrate that they are meeting the standards still. These are the things that have changed that you would need to be able to show. And of course, the importance of leadership. If you're already a training officer or a training manager, that's quite an easy one to show. But the standards expect everybody, whatever level of practice they're in, to understand what leadership looks like for them. So whether it's their own practice or whether it's leadership around them, to be able to have an understanding and to be able to articulate how they're demonstrating leadership within the scope of their practice. Okay, so what am I doing then to get ready? So we know the date is the 1st of September. What's happening in the background that we're doing to get ready for the portfolio launch? So I have a working group of colleagues who are practitioners and experienced trainees officers and verifiers from around the UK. All of the UK nations are represented, and we're working on the current portfolio and we are updating it to put in the new standards. So we've allocated the new standards to the modules and sections, and we've done a sense check to think that we're in the right place. We've got the knowledge and the competencies organised, and they do sit where we think they ought to sit. So we're as far as that at the moment. I'm not doing a grand unveiling today of all the standards and where they are, because that gives us a little bit of leeway to just move them around if we think there's the odd tweak that needs to be done. The equivalence route that I've mentioned, obviously this will affect as well, because the equivalence portfolio is very much mapped to the registration training portfolio. So for biomedical scientists, it will affect that route. And because the standards are general, they also affect the clinical scientists. So again, we're doing an update to the equivalence route for clinical scientists, that certificate of attainment as well. So lots and lots of documentation that needs to be updated to get ready for September. The other thing we're very conscious of is that we know that the training for trainers events that we're already running and that we've started to try and run more regularly will need to talk about the new standards and help people to understand those changes around EDI, the service user, well-being, mental health, public health and leadership, because they're the bits that have changed. So we're conscious that as people are getting ready for the portfolio, that they'll be looking to us to help them to get ready for that when we do our training for trainers events. So just to give you a bit of an idea, this is for routes 1, 2 and 3 that we talked about earlier. So these are the degree programs and doing a portfolio. So these would be degree with an integrated placement, degree with a training afterwards, or the non-accredited degree. So you can see from the list of documents on here, I'm not going to go through them all, but these are just the documents for those routes that I need to update. We need to do the same for the equivalents for biomedical scientists, and we need to do the same for the certificate of attainment for clinical scientists. So lots and lots of documentation prep to get ready. And what we'd like to do is launch the new portfolio with all the guidance documents and all the updated information as one thing over the summer, so that you get it all at one time, so you're not waiting for bits of documentation to come through. So lots and lots of work going on in the background to get all of these things ready for you. And we want to launch them where you've got everything that you need, you've got the guidance documents and you've got all the information to be able to get ready for that start. So remember, it's issuing from the 1st of September, the new portfolio, but up until that point, you carry on as you were with the current portfolio. So don't worry that there's going to be a sudden handbrake turn. You carry on as you are, and then the portfolio will be ready when you need it. So as I've just said, we've been looking at the new version of the portfolio, looking and adding in the new standards of proficiency and mapping them to the existing structure that we have. So those sections and modules that already exist. I'm sure you'll be pleased to know the overall structure is going to stay the same. So we're not done a massive overhaul. We've tried to keep it as it was as much as possible, but taking into account the new standards that need to be put in there. So there will be some modifications, there will be some changes. So as I've said, there are 2 useful PDFs that we're going to circulate after the session, which is the new standards and that comparison between the old and the new, if it's helpful to you to just get an idea of what sort of things will be coming. So this is just a track changes screenshot of what we've done at the moment for the sections of the portfolio. So you can see the only change in section 1, where module 2 was equality and diversity, it's now equality, diversity and inclusion. So all those extra EDI bits that we need to add in around the standards have gone into module 2 of section 1, which we hope you think is entirely logical. And then in section, oh sorry, I'll just do the best bit on that, and then I'll talk about section 2. So around EDI, as we said, the number of standards have changed, and there's a much bigger focus on equality, diversity and inclusion. In the previous standards, there were only 3 around education and training, and they've now been expanded, so there are now 15 standards of proficiency that mention equality, diversity, inclusion. So I've put the numbers on. You don't need to memorize them. You don't need to know what they are. I just thought I'd put them on so you know I know what they are. So these are the new EDI standards, and these are the ones that will be mapped to section 1, module 2. So you can see going from 3 to 15 standards is quite a big change, isn't it? But previously people have said that particular module seemed a little bit light, that there was, you know, the 3 pieces of evidence across the 3 standards was something that felt a little bit imbalanced. So having more in the EDI section is a good thing. And then on to section 2. So the module that's been affected here is the one that was health and safety previously, which is module 2, and that's now changed to health and safety and well-being. So all of the stuff around well-being, the person looking after themselves, having an understanding of their own mental health, physical health, and being able to ask for help and support should they need it, have been encompassed into module 2. So again, we hope you think that's a sensible change. That's the most obvious place for those things to go. And the other standards are equally distributed, as you would expect, across the other modules in section 1 and 2. So they haven't changed substantially. We've put the new standards in the place that makes sense. So each one of those sections will be slightly longer. Each one of the modules will have slightly more SOPs in because there are just more of them to allocate. So in section 2, that health and safety and well-being module previously had 7 SOPs associated with it for section 2, module 2. And again, the new version of the standards has 15. So all of those 15 standards have been allocated to section 2, module 2 to incorporate that new well-being information. The other things that we've done is we've looked at the other updated and additional standards, and we've mapped them to the existing portfolio structure and put them where we think is a logical place to put them. We've looked where we can at balancing the standards across the different modules. That doesn't mean the actual number, the total number of standards will be the same, because for some of them, several standards can be hit quite easily with one piece of evidence. So we've tried to balance them where we think the pieces of evidence are appropriate to hit that number of standards as you go through. We've also been talking about the number of pieces of evidence per module. So as Tahmina said, for the current portfolio, we have 3 pieces of evidence across each of the different modules. So there are 10 different modules, 3 pieces of evidence each. We think 30 pieces of evidence feels about right. We think that's the right place to be. What we're looking at is, do we still want 3 pieces of evidence across every module? Or where there are some modules that have more content, do we think it might be more appropriate to have 4? And a module where there is not as many standards that you need to evidence, might it be appropriate to have 2? So we're still having those discussions at the moment, and looking at splitting the guidance documents for everybody into separate ones. So there will be a guidance document for the trainee, there'll be a guidance document for the trainer, and there'll be a guidance document for the verifier, because at the moment they're all together. And we think there's bespoke information that for each of those people would be useful if they were teased out into separate documents. So that's one of the things that we're going to do. Oh, good, somebody likes that. Good, thank you. Thumbs up for that. So hopefully it'll be much easier to follow. So what's going to stay the same then? So I've told you what's different. This is what's going to stay the same. We think 30 pieces of evidence is a good size and shape to be able to show, demonstrate that you've met all the standards of proficiency. So we are looking at keeping 30 pieces, but looking at the balance of them, as I've said, across the different modules. Section 1, module 5, as you already will know, will have 1 piece of mandatory reflective statement evidence in there. So at the moment, section 1, module 5 is the only one that we say what the evidence has to be. One of those pieces has to be about the professional relationships and how your trainees work with others as part of a mandatory reflective statement. So the discussions that we're having at the moment are if it is helpful to have a mandatory piece of evidence per module. So is it helpful if we structure it a bit more and say to people, this is a framework for the portfolio. We would like you to have this piece of evidence in the module. You have flexibility over the other two. We don't want them to be the same. We want to keep some individuality in the portfolios, but we think it might be helpful to people when they're new to training or when they are doing training across different subject areas, that we have more structure around the portfolio. So we can definitely ask you questions around that, because I'm really keen for your input. I can see lots of floating thumbs, so I'm hoping that you think that's a good idea. So that's where we've got to at the moment with the considerations that we're making. So as I said, we're really aware people are knowing that the standards are coming, maybe getting a little bit anxious about what do I need to know, how am I going to get more support, how am I going to get ready. So we are already scheduling our next Training for Trainers event in May. So we've penciled in the 12th of May, if you want to just make a note of that while you're on the call. We are looking at the 12th of May, so I will do a Training for Trainers for verifiers, and Donna Torrance, who's our Head of Learning and Development, will do one for specialist portfolio examiners. So we're looking at Friday the 12th, if you want to pencil that in, and then we've asked the comms team to send information out after the Easter holidays, when people have had a little bit of headspace, hopefully, to think about what they're doing in May. We also have a support hub. We've got one in April, which is already planned, but the one in May, you might have seen, is on EDI anyway. So we've already scheduled an event which is around equality, diversity, inclusion. What kind of things might you want to consider? What sort of things might be useful evidence? What kind of words do you need to be aware of? Terminology, all of those kind of things to help you to get ready. We also have a resource hub that we're planning. So Jim, as our head of digital education, is working with both me and Donna to look at how we can host digital resources so that experienced trainers and people who are new to training can look at those resources and get that support as and when they want it online. So we're looking at developing a support hub to time that so that it is ready for the start of the registration training portfolio. I'm trying my very best, as is Jim, to get that ready. So we will try and make sure that we've got support for you that you can access as and when you need to. And then you might also know, if you've done your training recently, that the education team are buddying people. So I know that if people do a university training for trainers event, or if they have done it for a long time, sometimes they offer informally to mentor or buddy with others. So at the moment, we've got just less than 700 people who are registered with us at the IBMS to be verifiers. So if everybody from that 700 did 2 verifications a year, we wouldn't ever have a waiting list. Nobody would ever have to wait. But what we find is sometimes people do the training with good intentions, and then they're a little bit worried about doing that first one, a little bit scared, don't want to get it wrong. So we're trying to formalise that buddy system so that we have people who are willing to do the portfolios, buddy with somebody who's experienced, watch them, see how they do it, and then the experienced person would watch their first one. And if they're both happy, then the new verifier is on the way and off they go. So as well as offering more training sessions to get people in, we're trying to support people to take that first step and to do the verifications and to be happy and confident that their professional judgment is right. So we're doing all of those things to try and help you to get ready for September, to make sure that you all have what you need to be able to support us with delivering the registration training portfolio. And also, remember, these are the HCPC standards. They're not mine. I didn't personally create them or introduce them. So the Health and Care Professions Council have their own webinars, and if you follow the link at the bottom of the slide, it will take you to the page where it talks about them. And I know they've got about 4 or 5 scheduled in the next couple of months. So if someone in your training network can go and report back, that might be a useful way to create an easy way to look at involving yourself with those and getting that information. And they also have a YouTube channel. So once things have been delivered, they do have things that you can go back and have a look at. So please look at their resources as well as ours at the Institute. And I think that is it. So Jim, over to you.
That is it, and I think we're just about ready to move into the question phase, when obviously we can throw open the floor and start addressing some of the questions that have come in while Sue's been talking. But what we'd like to capture, just to help us plan the support that we put in place next, is what your main concerns are in relation to the new SoPs that are coming in, or anything that we've talked about in this support hub session today. So hopefully your Vvox screens at the minute are just asking for small snapshots, single words, couple of words that summarize what your main concerns are. And what ultimately will happen here is that a nice word cloud will build itself, with the size of the word reflecting the importance of those themes based on how frequently they come in. So it'd be really good if you could summarize in just a word or two what the biggest concerns are that you've got in relation to the new SoPs coming in, and how that will feed forward into the new reg portfolio from September, because that gives us some direction for the support that we offer from here on in. So I'll leave that open for a couple of minutes. Sue, if you want to start addressing questions while people are doing the word cloud, that might be a good
Yeah,
thing
no
to
problem at
start.
all. I've scrolled down. I think the first questions that I haven't answered, I think is Andrea's asked, hi Andrea, about the date for the equivalence route. So yes, we normally do one intake a year, Andrea, and the next one will be September 2023. So because it's not been a route that's been that popular, we tend to have a few people come in and start all as one cohort. So I've lost the question now because somebody asked something else. So yes, so if you can't see a date on the equivalence route online, the next one will be September. So we will try to put some information out and say, if you're thinking about this route, here's the information, please get your applications in by this date. It's normally September. And then we screen them and we send out application packs, and then those people will be told whether they're on the route or they're not, and then they have a calendar year from that start date. So our new cohort will be starting probably April, May time, just to give you an idea. So that's because the route has not got many people on it. It takes a while to get the applications in, and then a few people kind of almost just missed the deadline. So we said, you know, because it's not been that clear, we'll let you do it. So this year it's a little bit longer in that entry phase. So we'll try and get that so it's a lot easier for you to see and to understand, so that you can have a look at. No, the questions have all gone really weird. Every time somebody adds something, it makes it disappear. So the next one, I think, was Amani asked about the international route. So the international route isn't us, it's the HCPC. So they have an international route where people apply directly to them for registration. The IBMS qualifications for people based in the UK who train in the UK. So if it's international, then that will be direct to the HCPC. I'm scrolling back up again to try and find the right place. Keeps moving.
Would it help if I read
Could
them
you,
out?
yeah, would you be able to do that? Because I can't, every time I scroll up, it just jumps again because somebody else is asking a question.
Yeah, that's fine. Do you remember which who the person was that asked the last question?
I had Andrew Wilson, followed by Amani at 12:25. From there down, they keep jumping.
There's a question from Claire. Will there be a draft portfolio available prior to the 1st of September to allow us to develop the training tutorial programme prior to the new placement student starting? If so, when will this be available, please?
We can try, Claire. The problem is there's only one of me and I've got 30 odd accreditation events as well. So I've got meetings with the working group in both April and May. I'm hoping by then we'll have it nailed down. So even if it's a draft version of the portfolio and we're still working on the guidance, at least if we release that, you'll be able to start thinking about it. But actually the standards are out already. So where we've grouped them should be fairly intuitive, but you can start looking at what is it people are going to need to evidence before then. So don't feel you need to wait for the portfolio to come out. So we can try and get a draft out. What I'm very cautious of is we release a draft, then we change it, and then we change it, and then people go, no, I'm lost. I don't know what it is. So I want it to be a pretty final draft before it comes out and people look at it. So the short answer is probably yes, but it's probably going to be late spring.
Thanks, Sue. So the next question, it relates to the one that you've just answered, I think, but when will the reference copy of the portfolio be available?
Then late spring. Let's do what the government do and just give you kind of a season. I don't know the exact date. I would say late spring, probably.
Thanks, Sue. And then a question from Asma. So she's asking whether alongside top-up modules, can you apply for a trainee role without having completed the top-up modules yet? So can you kind of do your trainee position, like your placement, whilst you're doing the top-up modules?
Yeah, you can. So there seems to be a misnomer, and I'm not quite sure where it's come from, that you have to have completed the top-up modules before you apply for one of those roles. So it might be an MLA role, it might be an associate practitioner role, it might be a trainee role, but you can do them side by side. So you can be doing the top-up modules alongside doing the training. So the only caveat to that would be the portfolio evidence has a maximum lifetime of 3 years. So if you've got top-up that's going to take you 1 or 2 years to do, then it would make sense to me that you start looking for those posts at the same time as doing the top-up.
So a question from Adam. So he's currently working as an MLA. He has completed an accredited degree and has started to collect some evidence in his own time. I'm looking to apply for a trainee role in the near future. Hasn't yet officially applied for the portfolio, but is asking from September onwards, will it be the new standards that apply, or the evidence he's collected so far, will it be usable?
Yeah, so for you, Adam, it will depend on when the portfolio is issued. So if you have a portfolio issued to you before September, that's the one you'll be working through. If you have one issued to you after September, then it will be that one that you're working through. So the fact that you know what the standards are and you're collecting evidence is great, but you will need to have a training plan and a training officer and all of those things in place, and a portfolio that's been given to you for your official start date. So it will depend on when that happens, and then that will dictate which version you're on.
Thanks, Sue. Another question. Hello, I've completed my Masters in Biomedical Science from Swansea University. They started to apply for jobs, but only came to know about HCPC recently and about IBMS accreditation. So I don't think the course was IBMS accredited. I have no idea how to move forward.
Okay. So it isn't, I can tell you that the BSc and the MSc at Swansea isn't accredited. So what you would need to do is you would need to get all of your module descriptors and your transcripts and your certificates from your qualifications and apply for a degree assessment to be done. So if you look at the IBMS web pages and you look for the non-accredited degree assessment, then you'll find information on what it is that you need to do. So we ask for lots of information so we can make an informed decision about which areas you've covered and which ones you haven't. But unfortunately, it probably means you're going to need to pay for the degree assessment to be done, and then you're going to need to look at doing supplementary education in the clinical specialisms that you won't have covered.
So next one isn't a question, but it's more a comment around mandatory evidence that you suggested. So given the struggle people have with mandatory evidence and really understanding it in the right context, I'd rather not so many mandated evidences. That said, it would make assessing them easier.
I think the thing about the mandated one at the moment is people are quite unclear about what that reflective statement needs to be. So one of the reasons that we want to split the guidance is to give much clearer guidance. And what we'd like to get to is, here's some examples of good practice, good evidence, so that people can see what it is. So I think the problem with the reflective statement, because people ask me about it quite a lot, is what do I put in it? I don't know what it is, and I have to do that one. I don't have any choice. So if we can show examples of, this is a really good one, this is what we would like you to show us, then I think that would help. So I agree with the consistency. It's that balance, isn't it, between consistency between portfolios without taking that individuality away. So yeah, I think a framework in principle is quite a good idea if people are fairly positive about that. But I think it needs clearer guidance on, if it's mandatory, what am I doing?
Thanks, Sue. And a question from Gary. How would you demonstrate well-being?
I think that's a really interesting question, isn't it, Gary? So I think it's about demonstrating your understanding of what it is in your own context and in the context of people around you, and probably service users and patients being the focus of that. So again, it's one of those things that there are some of the standards wording that are not that clearly applicable to biomedical scientists in the day-to-day lives, and I have raised that with the HCPC, and they said where it's in a generic standard, you just have to apply it to your own context. So I think that's one of the ones that the HCPC and their webinars are going to come in, because what they're expecting you to demonstrate is understanding, demonstrating well-being is something that they need to define, because it's their standard that they're asking you to show. Whichever of the 15 disciplines you're in, whichever profession you're in, they're the ones who are asking you to do it. So I think that's a really good one to go to a webinar and see what the information is, and if it isn't clear, tell them it isn't clear.
Thanks, Sue. Another question about accessing the slides that we've just presented. How can they get access to the links and the documents just that we've mentioned?
So do you want to, Jim, do you want to just mention what we've done previously for the follow-up after we've done the sessions, just so that people know what to expect?
Yeah, sorry, you caught me off guard there. I was just replying to another question by text.
No problem.
Yeah, so after the session, what we'll do is we'll spend a little bit of time just topping and tailing the video from the session and extracting all of the kind of useful feedback that you guys have sent through, so that we can make sure that hopefully by the end of this week on email, you should get a link to the video, any follow-up documentation that we've talked about that we're going to release as well, and some evaluative feedback questions, which would be really helpful if you could complete for us as well. So hopefully by the end of this week, but it does somewhat depend on just when the comms team can get it all out.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. And how do the new HCPC standards of proficiency affect currently registered biomedical scientists?
So that will be the thing if they ask you. I forgot the word for audit. I meant to say audit and I couldn't think what the word was. So if the HCPC choose you as someone to be audited, then you will need to evidence from September onwards that you are complying with the new standards, which is why it's important for everybody to know. So it's not just people who are starting out, it's people who are established as well. So they will expect you to be able to demonstrate the new standards. My understanding is from September 23.
Thank you, Sue. Question around the virtual portfolio. So will the new changes to HCPC be accommodated into the e-workbook for the virtual IBMS registration portfolio?
Sorry, say that again, Tahmina. Will the new changes
to HCPC be accommodated into the e-workbook for the virtual portfolio?
Everything's been updated. So yeah, the answer is yes. Everything associated with the reg portfolio will be updated to the new standards. Yeah, from September forwards.
Thanks, Sue. And if someone's still using the old version of the portfolio and has verification within 3 years, would the verifier still look for evidence on the new standards?
No. So it will couple them together. So people, we believe it or not, have some of the quite old versions of portfolios that people have had extensions on for very good reason. So we always make sure the verifier knows which version it is and that they have the forms. So I saw somebody else was asking about the report forms and then tying together as well. So whichever version of the portfolio is being assessed, we'll make sure the verifier knows it's that version and that's the report that goes with it. When it's the new version, it will be the new version of the report that goes with the new version of the portfolio so that they all tie together.
Sue, there's quite a lot of questions in the chat about this, about people that are halfway through. Do they need to update and change what they're doing from September this year? There's quite a lot of questions about people
so
who
I've
are
checked,
at various stages.
yeah, I've checked with the HCPC and they've said to me, if they are already doing the portfolio, they finish what they're doing and we transition to the new standards from the 1st. But I can double check if people want me to double check and we can put some comms out. But people who are already doing it are likely to be assessed before the end of this year, I would guess, before the end of this calendar year. And the new standards are only coming in September. So it would be unfair for them to say we need to assess you against the new standards when that's not what the majority of your evidence will be. If you are issued a portfolio from September, then you're on the new standards.
Thanks, Sue. A question from Robert. What can academics involved in the biomedical science do without placements do to ensure that the uni curriculum leaves their graduates well prepared for the new standards?
So, very interestingly, so did you say that was Gavin?
Robert.
So Robert, what happened coincidentally is the QAA subject benchmark statement and the standards of proficiency both changed this year. So you'll see in the new standards, and we're asking everybody who's going through accreditation to map to the new benchmark standard. They have things like quality management, they have point of care testing, they have EDI, they have sustainability in them. So the two things dovetail together. Not entirely happy coincidence because I was involved in both. Not the HCPC ones, but so yeah, we knew that the taught material needs to tie better with the training in the labs and that students need to be better prepared when they come out, and a lot of that ties into Tahmina and Martin's survey that they did last year that was published in the Biomedical Scientist. So we know that there needs to be a closer alignment of what students are taught at the university. So you will need to align to the benchmark statement, Robert, but you don't need to worry about the standards of proficiency because they are in the portfolio in the clinical placement. So the standards of education and training haven't changed yet, so they would be what would affect our accreditation criteria and the way that we interact with universities, but they haven't changed this year. So if you applying the new benchmark standard, you'll be helping the students get ready for the different things in the portfolio anyway.
Thank you, Stephen. And just to add to that as well, with the paper that me and Martin wrote last year, we did an outline of sort of next steps for sort of the education institutes and employers, what we can be doing to support students. So that is an ongoing project at the moment. There's quite a lot of universities involved as well as employers interested. So if you do want to refer back to, I think it was the August issue.
I think it was August.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can see something that Carol said that I would just want to answer because I couldn't agree more, Carol. Carol said, I wish that all accredited degrees could be biomedical science singular. They will be, Carol. So the new benchmark statement says if they are IBMS accredited, it's biomedical science singular. If they are not, it's biomedical sciences plural. And the benchmark statement says very clearly that's what that is. That's what this is. And I and Jim and Chris Ward will be doing all the accreditation events. So we will make people who are accredited call it singular. that will be a condition if they don't do it already, to try and help. It's only a single letter difference, but it all helps. And I'm also working with UCAS on a subject guide for biomedical science. They don't have one. And we're trying to make it much clearer, and we're doing some videos around routes to registration and the difference between accredited and non-accredited degrees in May that will go out on social media as well. So we're doing what we can to try and help people make the right decision. We know there's a piece of work to do with schools, careers advisors, all of those kind of things to make it much, much clearer. So I'm working with people in each of the 4 nations around trying to clarify that information. There's nothing worse than somebody says to me, as we've had today, I've graduated and now I've realised. That just makes me feel a little bit sick. I don't think people should be in that position.
Thank you, Sue. I'm just going to read out one more question because I'm conscious of the time, and then got this question. It was from Philippa, and I'm just trying to find it again. It's around placing students who have already completed their portfolio on placement, but now have a year to go to complete a degree. How it will affect that.
So what's the question? They've done the portfolio, gone back to do final year.
Yeah, so how will it affect them?
That's fine. So it will be, as I said before, so it'll be paired. So the portfolio they've done, we know will be done in 22-23. So when they have their assessment after the final year, then it will make sure the verifier knows it was the old portfolio, not the new one.
So, Jim, are we going to take a copy of these questions and answer the questions that we haven't been able to answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can do answers to those. So we can either do frequently asked questions, or we can just do individual answers, and we can make sure everybody gets access to those, can't we, after the session?
Yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah. And Stephanie's asked about first year apprentices. So again, if you've started your apprenticeship and you're on the old version, that's fine. If your apprenticeship is 3 years long, you will have been issued your portfolio. If you've not got it yet, and your apprenticeship is 4 years, then you'll be on the new one, because that's when you get it. So it's really from the point you receive it, that's the portfolio that you're doing. Yeah, good point, Andrea, about the UCAS events. I have said I've offered to go to any UCAS events, they'll have me, and to go and talk about the IBMS and accreditation and what it means. But yeah, it would be really useful to get more information. So if you have any careers events in your location and you think it would be useful to have some information, and we've done some little leaflets around routes to registration as well, the little A5 leaflets. Anyone in practice, anyone at a university, if you would like them, let us know. It's got a QR code to the web page that tells you more about routes to registration, so you can have them in your foyers, you can take them to schools, wherever your children go. Take them to people. We've got thousands of them. I asked the comms team to print loads, so yeah, we've got loads of them.